Welcome to the Speak English podcast. Listen, learn, and speak with confidence.
So welcome to today's deep dive. If you're joining us, you are probably the kind of learner who loves gaining, really thorough knowledge without feeling totally overwhelmed.
Right, getting into the weeds but keeping it approachable.
Exactly. And today we are decoding this fascinating hidden language, specifically the way English speakers talk about health and fitness.
Yeah, and it's probably not what you'd expect.
No, not at all. Usually when we talk about things like health, diet, or exercise, there is this expectation of precision, right?
Oh, absolutely. Total precision.
Yeah, like you step on a scale, it gives you a number, you run on a treadmill, and the screen on your wrist tells you exactly how many miles you covered.
What your average heart rate was, your VO2 max.
Exactly. It feels very binary. It's highly quantifiable. I mean, the modern approach to the physical body is essentially just data science at this point.
Yeah, we measure, we track, we optimize.
We neatly categorize our physical output into like a spreadsheet of our lives. But then you actually start talking to another human being about your routine.
All right, you step away from the smartwatch.
Yeah, you step away from the watch and into the world of everyday conversation at, say, the office water cooler, and suddenly that neat little spreadsheet just completely shatters.
Because we aren't really exchanging data points anymore.
Exactly. We're looking at a conversational landscape that is incredibly murky, highly emotional, and honestly fraught with social landmines.
It really is. And the language we use in those moments betrays what is actually going on beneath the surface of the interaction.
So to explore this, we're pulling from excerpts from this amazing piece called Talking About Health and Fitness in English.
Yeah, and we should clarify, this isn't a deep dive into biology or workout regimes, right?
Right, good point. No, we aren't giving you fitness tips. It's a linguistic and cultural breakdown of how casual conversations about fitness actually work. Okay, let's unpack this. What's the core premise here?
So the core premise from the source text is that health and fitness conversations in English are actually a complex blend of two entirely distinct vocabularies operating at the exact same time.
Okay, two vocabularies.
Yeah. On one side, you have the practical, routine-focused language. This is the quantifiable side we just mentioned.
The spreadsheet language.
Exactly. It's the language of reps, calories, miles, heart rates, what you physically do. It's the vocabulary of what you physically execute and consume.
Right, the raw data of the physical act.
Yeah.
But as what the text makes clear is that if you only use that spreadsheet language, if you just read off your metrics to someone, you sound utterly robotic.
Oh, totally. You sound completely detached from the human experience of fitness.
And people will probably slowly back away from you at the party.
They absolutely will. So the text argues that inextricably linked to this practical data is a highly emotional language.
The second vocabulary.
Right. The second vocabulary is the language of motivation, the language of the struggle. It's about willpower, guilt, exhaustion, and, psychological release.
And the text points out this mix isn't an accident, right? It's not just people being sloppy with their words.
Not at all. In English, fitness is discussed in everyday conversation just as much of a mental and emotional challenge as a physical one. That is the why here.
So understanding the interplay between those two vocabularies is kind of the fundamental secret to true fluency in this area.
Yeah, if you want to connect with native speakers on this topic without sounding intense or weird, you have to understand that you are navigating a social and psychological space, not just a physical one.
It's about humanizing the data.
Exactly. When someone asks you about your gym routine, they are rarely asking for a literal recounting of your sets and reps.
Right. They don't actually care about your spreadsheet.
No, they are initiating a social ritual. And to understand how this ritual works in real time, how these two vocabularies dance with each other, we really have to examine the natural arc of a fitness conversation.
Yeah, the source text maps this out brilliantly. It shows this predictable rhythm to how native speakers actually open, navigate, and eventually close this topic.
It's a very specific arc.
So let's walk through that arc. Starting with how native speakers actually open the topic, the art of the vague opening.
Yeah, the initial contact.
When you look at how these interactions begin out in the wild, the initial contact is almost deliberately opaque, right?
Very much so. The text highlights that the foundational phrases almost everyone uses to open this topic are things like work out or stay in shape.
Just super broad.
Yeah, the source examples given are sentences like, I try to work out a few times a week, or I'm not super intense about it, I just want to stay in shape.
Think about how incredibly broad those statements are. It's the conversational equivalent of walking up to a stranger at a party and saying, "I like to read."
That is a great analogy.
Right, because you don't immediately launch into a lecture about reading 14th century Russian literature. You open the door broadly to see if the other person is even interested.
Exactly. You are just testing the waters. And this vagueness is the entire point. It is a highly strategic deployment of low commitment language.
Low commitment language. I love that phrase.
Yeah, because neither work out nor stay in shape specifies whether you are like training for an ultramarathon or just doing 20 minutes of gentle yoga in your living room or powerlifting hundreds of pounds.
You're deliberately withholding the specifics.
Right. By withholding the specific details of the physical routine, you leave room for the conversation to breathe.
It reflects a very common English conversational pattern, right?
Yes. Starting extremely broad, testing the waters, and then narrowing down to specifics only when there is a mutual established reason to do so.
Like if there's a vibe, it's essentially a social pacing mechanism.
Exactly.
Because if you open with, "I run 50 miles a week and my heart rate zone is strictly monitored," you are demanding a very specific high-intensity response from the listener.
You're backing them into a corner.
Yeah, where they either have to match your intensity or awkwardly admit they don't do anything similar, which feels terrible.
Right. It creates immediate social friction. But by opening with, "I just try to stay in shape," you are offering a low-pressure gateway.
So if you're the listener out there and you want to initiate a fitness chat without sounding overwhelming, you use this gateway.
Exactly. Because if the other person responds to that with a blank stare or a polite, "Oh, that's nice," then the door is closed.
And you haven't overexposed yourself.
You haven't overexposed yourself, and you haven't made them uncomfortable. You've protected the social face of both participants.
The vagueness acts as a linguistic cushion.
But if they respond with, "Oh, really? What do you do?" Or, "Same here, I've been trying to get to the gym more lately," then you have successfully established mutual interest.
And only at that point do you move to the specific details.
Right. The text gives examples of that next narrower step. Things like, "I mostly work out at the gym, lifting weights," or, "For me, it's mostly running and some yoga on the side."
So you essentially have to earn the right to share the specifics.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Because oversharing the technical details of your physical routine too early in an interaction can just feel unexpectedly aggressive.
It really can. It can feel like you are imposing your lifestyle on someone else or, subtly setting up a dynamic where you are judging them for not having a similar routine.
Yeah, using those broad, soft openers establishes common ground without raising the stakes. It's the socially acceptable key to unlock the conversation.
And once you navigate that initial physical handshake and the routine is established on the table, the conversation almost inevitably gravitates toward fuel.
Right. We move from the gym floor to the kitchen. Diet.
Which is a notoriously tricky topic in any language or culture.
Oh, yeah. It's so deeply tied to identity, morality, social class. But the English conversational norms around it, as outlined in the text, are fascinatingly specific in how they manage this tension.
They really are.
Yeah.
And this brings us to this massive cultural mechanism within the language, the cultural rejection of extremes.
Yes. How do native speakers talk about diet without making everyone in the room incredibly uncomfortable?
The source text zeroes in on the specific phrasing they use to denote reduction. The examples of realistic, acceptable conversation use the phrase cut back on.
Cut back on.
Right, which means to reduce something. Sentences like, "I've been trying to cut back on sugar lately," or "We've been trying to cut back on eating out."
And this is placed in stark contrast to absolute claims, right?
Yes, which the text explicitly identifies as unrealistic or problematic in casual conversation. Things like, "I've completely eliminated sugar," or "I never eat carbs."
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Wait, what if someone actually has completely eliminated sugar?
Right, like for medical reasons or something.
Exactly, like it's a factual truth about their life. Why does the text indicate that native speakers are inherently skeptical of absolute claims like "I never eat sugar" in a casual setting?
Well, the text unpacks this sociological insight. In English-speaking health conversations, there is a deep prevailing cultural preference for gradual, sustainable change.
Rather than extreme, all-or-nothing transformations.
Exactly. Yeah. When someone drops an absolute claim like that into a casual conversation, the literal meaning might be factual, but the pragmatic meaning, The social subtext that the listener receives is entirely different.
Oh, I see. It's like dropping an anchor in a speedboat. It violently halts the forward momentum of the social interaction.
It really does. It suddenly shifts the dynamic from a shared exchange of human experiences into a rigid hierarchy.
Because the listener hears something else entirely.
Right. The listener often hears, I possess perfect, unyielding discipline, which implies I am morally superior to you in this context.
Wow, yeah. It creates an immediate friction because it frames diet not as a shared human struggle, but as a pass-fail test of character.
A test that the speaker has already aced. And absolute claims are often viewed suspiciously as performative, unrealistic, or even just bragging.
That makes so much sense. It forces the listener to immediately audit their own behavior.
Exactly.
If you tell me you never eat sugar while I am holding a cookie, I'm suddenly hyper-aware of my cookie.
You feel
I feel totally judged, even if you didn't explicitly judge me. The absolute language creates an involuntary defensive reaction in the listener. It just kills the camaraderie of the conversation.
It isolates the speaker. But the phrase cut back on functions as the exact opposite. It sounds honest and relatable. It is a tool for social cohesion.
So how does that work linguistically?
Well, when you say, I'm cutting back on sugar, or caffeine, or eating out, you are signaling a few very important things to the listener.
You're signaling your values.
Exactly. First, you are acknowledging that sugar is appealing and that avoiding it requires effort, which immediately validates the listener's own probable struggles with diet.
It's a relief to hear.
Yeah. And second, it leaves room for human fallibility. It implies you might still have a slice of birthday cake occasionally.
It presents you as a reasonable person navigating a complex world rather than like an ascetic monk living on a mountain of pure discipline.
Exactly. You're telling the listener, I am a reasonable person making a realistic effort, rather than demanding awe for an impossible standard.
It's fascinating how we use language to signal our approachability. Using cut back on is a conversational flag you plant in the ground.
It really is.
And if we look at the cultural history that built this specific linguistic preference, we have to consider the collective burnout from decades of extreme diet culture.
The cultural context is vital here. The linguistic immune response to absolutes didn't just develop in a vacuum.
Right. We have all witnessed the era of crash diets.
The complete demonization of certain macronutrients, the people who announce they are completely eliminating carbs or fats, only to quietly abandon that rigid rule a few weeks later.
Yes. The culture has learned through repeated exposure that absolutes in diet are rarely sustainable.
Therefore, when we hear an absolute in casual conversation, our instinct is to view it as performative rather than authentic.
We distrust the language of elimination because we know how rarely it reflects the long-term reality of human behavior.
Cutting back is the language of sustainable, albeit imperfect, effort.
And that realism, that baseline acknowledgement that you are making an ongoing imperfect effort, leads directly into the single most important and difficult concept in the entire fitness lexicon.
Yes, the transition from what we eat to how we keep the routine going. This is where the emotional vocabulary truly takes over the conversation.
The text highlights one specific word that serves as the crown jewel of this entire vocabulary. It explicitly identifies this as the most frequently used word in fitness conversations.
And universally acknowledged as the hardest part of any routine.
The word is consistent.
Yes, consistent, meaning doing something regularly over time.
The examples provided in the source are practically the anthems of the modern fitness experience.
They really are. Things like, honestly, the hardest part isn't the workouts themselves, it's just staying consistent.
Or, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you're consistent with it.
The elevation of that specific word, above all the technical jargon, is a profound linguistic marker.
The text calls this the most important word. Why is that?
Well, when you use the word consistent, you are signaling a high level of maturity and self-awareness regarding the reality of health and fitness.
You're acknowledging that consistency matters more than intensity.
Exactly. You are openly acknowledging that the technical details, whether you choose Pilates, weightlifting, keto, or a Mediterranean diet, are entirely secondary to the behavioral challenge of simply executing the plan over a long timeline.
It shifts the entire conversation away from a debate over methods.
Right. There's no longer an argument to be had about the optimal biomechanics of a squat.
Instead, using the word consistent pivots the discussion to a shared, fundamentally human struggle over our own psychology. It shifts the conversation from a debate over what to do to a shared human struggle over how to keep doing it.
That's beautifully put.
It's like starting a new routine is exactly like buying a beautifully bound, incredibly expensive new daily planner at the start of a new year.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Right. The allure of the blank planner is intoxicating. Buying it is easy. It represents pure, unadulterated potential.
You're going to be so organized.
Yes. You write in it perfectly for the first week using color-coded pens. But writing in that planner every single day in November, when it is raining, when you are exhausted from work, when the novelty has entirely evaporated. When the reality of mundane repetition sets in, that is the actual mountain to climb.
That friction between the initial enthusiasm and the long-term reality is the universal bottleneck of human behavior.
Initial motivation always fades.
Always. And the text points out that by bringing up consistency as the primary challenge, you are validating a universal experience.
You strip away the pretense that fitness is just about finding the right magical routine.
Right. And you admit that it is a daily battle against inertia.
So for you, the listener, navigating these conversations, deploying this word is an incredibly powerful tool for building instant rapport.
Yes. When you hear or use this word, you are tapping into a universal vulnerability.
When you admit to someone that you struggle to stay consistent, you are offering a moment of vulnerability. Because almost everyone has started a routine with enthusiasm, only to watch it fade.
When you voice that struggle, the immediate internal reaction of the listener is usually profound relief. They realize they aren't alone in their failure to be perfect.
It acts as a linguistic handshake.
It establishes that both participants in the conversation are fallible humans who find habit formation difficult. Native speakers instinctively recognize this theme as the hallmark of a genuine, authentic conversation.
It moves the interaction from a superficial exchange of stats into a moment of genuine empathy. But, there is a breaking point to that friction.
Yes, there is.
When the pressure to maintain that routine goes wrong, when the effort to maintain that rhythm snaps, the conversation must pivot to the cautionary side of fitness language.
We move from the struggle to maintain to the consequences of pushing too hard in the attempt to force consistency.
And the text introduces a phrase that carries immense weight here, the retrospective confession. The phrase is burnt out.
Burnt out, right. Describing exhaustion from stress or overexertion.
It describes the specific mistake of pushing too hard too quickly. The source examples are quite poignant.
Yeah, things like, I went way too hard in January and ended up completely burned out by February.
Or, pace yourself, I got burnt out trying to do too much too soon.
It's a very common experience.
I noticed something fascinating in the text, though. It says people rarely say, I'm worried about getting burnt out in the moment. It's almost always talked about in hindsight. Why is that?
The text unpacks this as the concept of retrospective wisdom. You don't usually see burnout coming.
Because when you are in the middle of overtraining, the physical adrenaline and the psychological ego of crushing your goals just completely mask the accumulating fatigue.
Exactly. You feel driven right up until the moment you physically or mentally break. The dopamine hit of early progress creates a powerful illusion of sustainability.
It is only when the system fails, when the thought of the gym induces nausea or the rigid diet triggers a massive binge, that the reality becomes clear.
Right. So when people use the phrase burnt out in conversation, they are, by definition, looking back at a miscalculation of their own limits.
They are looking back at a mistake with the benefit of hindsight. It introduces the emotional side of the vocabulary, acknowledging failure and struggle instead of just presenting a polished, successful image.
It's an admission of failure, which ties directly back to why this language builds connection.
Sharing the experience of burnout is essentially offering a cautionary tale as a gift to the listener.
It is a mechanism for sharing hard-won wisdom.
It reminds me of the stark contrast between how a rookie and a veteran talk in any demanding field.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right, a rookie will talk endlessly about how fast they can go, how much weight they can move, how little sleep they can operate on. They brag about their intensity.
But a veteran talks almost exclusively about pacing.
Yes, they talk about longevity, recovery, and avoiding the specific mistakes that cause you to flame out and quit.
Using the phrase burnt out signals to the listener that you are a veteran of the fitness struggle. You have survived your own ego.
And if we look at the broader linguistic ecosystem we've been mapping out, the text connects this to the earlier point about rejecting extremes.
Yes, burnt out is the linguistic consequence of failing to use moderation.
It is what happens when you fail to cut back and instead try to eliminate or go too hard.
It is what happens when you substitute extreme intensity for steady consistency. The vocabulary itself maps out the behavioral pitfalls.
Which forces a very profound existential question into the conversation. By acknowledging failure and the limits of physical intensity, the conversation is forced to ask a deeper question.
If we aren't just doing this to be intense and perfect, why are we doing it at all?
Right. Why subject ourselves to this cycle? If we aren't doing this just to execute a flawless spreadsheet of data, what is the actual goal?
The natural flow of an authentic English fitness conversation inevitably leads right to that answer. It serves as the ultimate destination of the conversational arc.
And the text centers this final stage on one encompassing, holistic word. The word is well-being.
Well-being, meaning overall health and happiness.
This word functions as a holistic umbrella, tying fitness back to mental state, mood, stress levels, and general happiness.
It takes the entire preceding conversation, the vague opening routines, the moderation of sugar, the painful struggle to be consistent, the retrospective wisdom of burnout, and it ties all of that physical effort directly to psychological survival.
Listen to how native speakers deploy this concept, according to the source text. Honestly, exercise does more for my mental well-being than my physical health at this point.
Or, working out is basically my stress relief.
Okay, so what does this all mean?
Discussing well-being is how native speakers typically close a fitness conversation. It reframes the entire preceding discussion.
It changes the meaning of every single thing discussed prior to that moment.
Exactly. It shifts the focus completely away from physical appearance or performance, proving the text's initial claim.
That fitness talk is actually about emotional and psychological survival.
Yes. If a 20-minute conversation about running and cutting back on carbs ends without mentioning well-being, it can easily feel shallow, vain, or purely aesthetically driven.
But the moment someone says, it's for my well-being, they are revealing the actual engine driving the behavior.
They are saying, I do not subject myself to the treadmill to fit into a specific size of clothing. I do it so the background anxiety of my daily life doesn't overwhelm me.
It completely humanizes the entire endeavor.
When someone cites well-being as their primary motivator, they are acknowledging that we live in a highly demanding, stressful world.
And this physical routine, however flawed or inconsistent it might be, is their chosen coping mechanism. Let's just dynamically review the recognizable, authentic arc outlined in the text because it is so cohesive.
It really is a masterclass in social pragmatics.
So step one, you open broad with routine. You use low-stakes language like workout, testing the waters without imposing.
Right. Then step two, you discuss diet realistically. You use phrases like cut back on, actively rejecting performative extremes that create social hierarchy.
Step three, you reflect honestly on difficulty. You bond over the universal behavioral friction of trying to stay consistent, perhaps offering the retrospective wisdom of a time you burned out.
And finally, step four, closing with mental health. You reframe the entire struggle under the umbrella of well-being, acknowledging that the ultimate goal is psychological equilibrium.
So for you, the listener, by mastering this specific arc, moving from physical routine to emotional reflection, you aren't just learning vocabulary.
No, you are learning the blueprint for genuine human connection in English.
It captures how people actually experience fitness. It's a mix of discipline, setbacks, and the search for feeling better, not just looking better.
We use these interactions to process our own struggles by mirroring them with others.
It has been a genuinely fascinating exploration decoding this hidden emotional language of fitness.
It really has. We started by looking at how fitness language presents itself as a binary quantifiable science.
The spreadsheet language.
Right. Only to discover that the injection of emotional vocabulary is what actually creates authenticity.
The blend of practical and emotional vocabulary is everything. But before we conclude, the synthesis of these linguistic patterns leaves us with a final, unscripted concept to mull over based on the text. A very provocative thought.
Yes. Based on the deep connection between the words we choose and the reality we experience, we have to consider the directional flow of that influence.
If native speakers are culturally conditioned by their language to frame fitness in terms of moderation like cutting back and mental health like well-being rather than extremes, does the language we use actually shape our physical habits?
It's a brilliant application of linguistic relativity, the idea that our conversational vocabulary could act as a self-fulfilling prophecy for our physical routines.
If the social norms of the language force you to constantly verbally frame your diet as cutting back rather than eliminating, Does that linguistic framework eventually alter your internal monologue?
If you consciously change your vocabulary to be gentler and more moderate, could that actually make you more consistent and less prone to burnout in your own fitness journey?
If you actively force yourself to use those realistic words to describe your routine both to others and to yourself, it stands to reason it could fundamentally alter your relationship with the routine itself.
Speaking about your physical body and your daily efforts, with the grace and realism demanded by casual conversation, might be the exact mechanism that saves you from burnout.
It suggests that the most critical piece of equipment in any fitness journey isn't the shoes or the smartwatch, but the specific words you choose to describe the effort. Does the behavior build the vocabulary? Or does the vocabulary slowly build the behavior?
That is definitely a question to sit with.
The next time you find yourself discussing your routine at the office water cooler, think about it. Keep questioning the unseen mechanics of the words you use every day. Look for the emotional truth hiding beneath the practical data, and we will see you on the next deep dive.